Darryl Chen leads Hawkins Brown's urban design studio, and in London he steers local authority work on town centre regeneration, public space and industrial intensification. Now, Hawkins Brown are involved in some key London master planning and regeneration projects, from Smithfield Market to Earls Court. Darryl, we're hearing quite a lot at the moment about 15-minute cities, reduction in activity in the central activity zone, increased demand for houses outside London. How do you see the shape of the city in a post-COVID environment, since you're designing quite big chunks of it at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a key question that I'm actually hearing a lot, and I think it's something we're all kind of struggling in various ways to get a grip with. I guess I've been challenged to think not about what a direct response to COVID in the short term might be, and thinking about it more in terms of the crisis within a wider trajectory, and thinking about actually COVID being a catalyst for changes that were already kind of bubbling and looking for answers before the crisis hit. And so, for instance, our transport commuting infrastructure was under a lot of strain, and we're going to a kind of more staggered model of commuting hours. There's underutilized space within homes through the day, which is, as we all know, being occupied by home working. There are issues about retail on high streets and growing vacancies. So there's kind of renewed interest in what the local offer of neighborhoods is. But all of those problems actually were things that were kind of bubbling up before the crisis hit. And generally in normal times, where we kind of deal with change incrementally, whereas COVID has all kind of forced us all as a society and as a city to bring about perhaps some step changes to some of those problems. I think one of the things that has endured is the kind of idea of what social space looks like. And I think even with lockdown and social distancing, we've found, we as Londoners have found ingenious ways of continuing to meet. The social aspect of life as human beings has never been more important. We'll always find ways of working with each other. I guess what we've been thinking about at Hawkins Brown is kind of the innovation of social value and measuring social impact, which has kind of come about in the last few years and is rapidly gaining kind of more momentum. And this is something, I think, the measurability it enables us to measure social impact. And that's important because we can use that as a lever to make better developments, particularly with, development appraisals that might only otherwise be about financial bottom lines, increasingly about environmental measurements, but actually that social aspect is so critical to the attractiveness of spaces. The other aspect is culture, and that's, you mentioned Smithfield as a project we're working on. COVID has kind of reinforced the brief that we had, which was to think about the whole area and its cultural offer, both in terms of a whole curatable space of interior and exterior spaces that provide a platform for thinking about multiple histories in the area and defining what culture looks like and how we experience that. Inevitably, we're going to be using our outdoor spaces in different kinds of ways, and thinking about the whole Smithfield public realm area as a curatable space. We called it the field of Smithfield, as a really kind of interesting idea that's only got more momentum as the crisis has hit, and we're kind of working out ways of dealing with it.
So you've been involved in town centre regeneration, and presumably the problems of the centre are actually perhaps a benefit for outer London?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing a lot of development and regeneration activity, both private and public sector, in zone 2, 3 and outwards. I would say, as we're all trying to deal with, or as COVID has catalyzed changes in the way we live and work and commute and experience our places, that actually everywhere benefits. And this is a massive kind of reordering of how we do things. I guess I'm a positive person, so I'm thinking about the positive change that comes about with that. But in the neighborhood where I'm at, there's been a rise in home-based restaurants. Suppliers of goods have banded together in order to do their deliveries. And you can imagine that there's that 15-minute city where there's a lot of local offer which is being kind of injected into our high streets, which would be amazing. But I think central London is going to change as well, quite profoundly. And at Earls Court, we've been challenged also to think about what the offer of a big brownfield site in central London can do, both for London's international competitiveness, because we know that's going to be important, but also what a cultural offer to London is. And central London will continue to do what the suburbs cannot do, and that is to bring together all Londoners, be a place for all of Londoners to come together, to meet and to present things at scale and at quality. I mean, you can't do a V&A. That offer cannot appear in every high street. You can't do a theatre district in every high street. So there's going to be kind of changes, but central London is going to be kind of even more central London-like, I think, in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice way to see it, a place for all Londoners, but actually yes. Lots of UK people generally, really, and overseas people too, hopefully one day in the future. You've been involved with projects that bring workspace and residential together in response to the pressure on land for light industrial uses. How's progress on that front? And will you be able to include that sort of thing in the Earls Court master plan?
Early days for Earls Court. I don't want to put words in our clients' mouths about the kind of the mix of things, but I guess everything's on the table. And certainly, if any sector has ridden out the crisis better than anyone, it's the industrial sector. And I've seen recently that there's a historically unprecedented demand for B8 space in London and across the country, with customer online spending and the whole supply chain relying on these big sheds, both the mega sheds out in the outside of London and urban kind of urban warehousing. I think it used to be something which it was purely pushed by local authorities and the GLA, and it was kind of something that was strategically seen as important and that developers were kind of forced into if they had to do it. But I think increasingly with the kind of the demand outstripping supply for those well-located urban warehousing points, values are going to be such that they can form a legitimate commercial strategy for a mixed-use project. But on the projects we're working with, it is definitely the public sector leading from a policy and delivery point of view. We're doing 3 sites for the GLA's pilot industrial intensification, and also helping TfL bring forward some of their land for kind of industrial residential mixed use. Yeah, and there are other architects who are coming to terms with the requirements to provide cellular space above large span structures. Resi above supermarkets has been around for quite a while. And vehicles are going electric. So I think it's slowly but surely happening, and we're going to see a great deal of it in the future. I mean, before crisis hit, we were getting a steady stream of inquiries, kind of developers kind of nibbling and landowners sort of kind of peering in at the edges to see what that future might look like. And I think this perhaps again is like a tipping point.
You're a member of NLA's expert panel on planning. What do you see as sort of key issues that the panel should be addressing at the moment?
Yeah. I'm joined by some very clever people on that planning panel. We've had our first session where there was a real good spread of ideas, and I don't think I can represent the whole of everything that was discussed then, but a couple of biggies for me is London's response to the national planning policy changes that have been brought about, and what the liberalisation of some of the use classes, and B8 was excluded from those changes, but certainly there was a kind of lumping together of commercial use classes, B1A, CA, and A1A2 and A3. And it's a bit of an experiment, and we're keen to see kind of what that might be, how that might be realized, what it's going to look like. I think we talked about perhaps bringing together a kind of audit of what happened the last time we that there were big reforms, particularly to permitted development rights, and actually that's something, particularly in an age now when good information is so important, actually, just to bring together some facts about what the consequences of the last PD reforms were. And we were also talking about a survey of boroughs to see what their attitudes were towards, whether they would actually push back on all of those reforms or actually roll with it and see if it actually did kind of revive the fortunes of high streets and so forth. So that's kind of a big one. National policy is kind of staring us in the face, and we're not sure what's going to happen there. One of my kind of hobby horses at the moment is thinking about London's character, and so I think that's the other big thing that the planning panel can contribute to. The London Plan makes a big noise about kind of London's character being one of the counterbalancing considerations to things like density and tall buildings, and I think we have to take it really seriously. But there's not really a widespread kind of understanding of what character is and how you go about assessing it. And it's planning is so subjective in this country that it's really subject to a lot of interpretation. IJ has just published a book on character, and I think that's a really good contribution to the discourse. But I think then once we've got a hold of what character is, the bigger question is how much that should be a driver to urban form, as opposed to things like the way that we live now, the way where we're commuting, the demographic shifts that are happening in London. In the end, all planning changes have visual effects on what the city looks like, and we've been going through such profound changes recently, say in the last 20 years. Perhaps now is also the time where we kind of step back and say, okay, well, what will our places look like? What does intensification look like on the character, and what does it do for the character of our villages and towns, particularly in the outer parts of the city? I mean, I don't have any answers or a position on it at the moment, but it just seems like something that we ought to be talking about kind of a great deal more.
Well, thank you very much, Darryl. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for joining me today.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter.